Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio.
Well, you were definitely missed. I'm glad you're back. And while you were out for the week, that, as always, lots of things going on with Twitter Spaces. Really eager to share all this with everyone.
So yeah, let's dive in. You found this first one, Madeline. Straight over to you.
Yes, as always, host Celine Money finds, uncovers everything that's going on with Twitter Spaces. I love it because I can always just, if I don't ever miss anything, like I see a lot of it myself, and then I'll see his tweets. I'm like, oh, I already saw that, but good. I'm still glad that, he's posting this out for everybody to see. But then there are times where, I'll see something through him first. And this was one of those tweets where he was mentioning a feature alert for being able to schedule spaces, multiple spaces. Now, I've been waiting a very long time for this because I don't just co-host this one room with you each week. There's 2 others. So that's 3 a week. Now, luckily you set up this room, you schedule it under your account each week. So that frees me up to always be scheduling my other 2 rooms each week. And it's so incredibly frustrating for me that I can only schedule one at a time. And so my other 2 spaces are on Thursdays and Saturdays. So there's only 2 days in between for me to be promoting, right? And it's very frustrating that when my Thursday, which is late in the afternoon, ends, I then have to quickly schedule my next space, which is for Saturday. And I have such a short window to promote that link. And I feel very strongly that that link is everything in our promotions because people can set a reminder from the link and make it very easy for themselves. They can also add it to their own calendar, their Google Calendar or their Apple Calendar. So I have been requesting this for some time. I know other hosts like myself that schedule multiple rooms each week feels that same frustration. And host Celine had tweeted out that they're testing the ability to schedule multiple spaces. And I've seen with screenshots like what he has in this tweet, and I've seen a few other people sharing their screenshots that they are able to do this. And I did not have the ability. And I was so frustrated. And then all of a sudden, like magic yesterday, Suze, I got it. And the weird thing was, I did not get a notification that I could do it. No pop-up screen, nothing. So what I did, because I could see other hosts could do it, I thought, well, maybe it's there and I just don't know it. So I was scheduling my Thursday Twitter Smarter Spaces room. So I scheduled that yesterday. And I thought, okay, before I promote the link, let me go ahead and see if I could schedule my Saturday room. And the worst case scenario is it throws it all off. The Thursday one disappears because I did the Saturday one, and I'll just start over. No harm, no foul. That was my thinking. So I go in, I schedule the Thursday, and I thought, okay, let's just try this. And I scheduled for Saturday. And after I was done, I was able to see the upcoming spaces for both. They were both there. And I was thrilled, Suze. Oh my gosh, I am like in heaven. So I've been curious, how many people have this? Who all is able to test it? Sometimes what Spaces will do is give these abilities to those of us that were early beta hosts back in the early days of Spaces. Sometimes they just roll things out randomly. So I wasn't quite sure. I had tweeted host Celine today to try to see, kind of pick his brain to see if he knew. He says he knows a lot of people that have it. But what was so interesting is that in my conversation with him, Don Coven, who's actually here live in the audience, he responded and says, I have the ability to do this, and I've never hosted a room. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Just like you, I stumbled across the fact that I could do it, totally by accident. And to be honest, I kind of did it, and I did it once. And now I'm finding it really difficult to find out where that list of upcoming spaces is. Like, it doesn't automatically appear in the top right-hand corner. Maybe it's not there for me anymore. Maybe it's been removed and I'm not a beta tester anymore. But certainly, I took the screenshot. I have the evidence. It definitely did do it because I already had this room scheduled. And I don't even know what made me do it, really. I think I was checking that I'd scheduled this room because where I've been in and out so much, I was kind of double checking I had it. And went in to see and realised it said upcoming spaces in the top. And I thought, oh, that must mean I can schedule more than one. Tried it just like you did. And I saw that list, which is in the screenshot here, that in host Celine's tweet in the nest, and you can see it in the show notes. But I've then had real difficulty getting back to that screen. Is it really obvious to you, Madeline? Is it just there? Have you been back?
It's interesting. So when I first scheduled the multiple rooms, I saw no way to go see. I did not say upcoming spaces in the top right corner. So initially I thought, okay, the test didn't work. When I set up the Saturday, it automatically deleted the Thursday. That was my assumption, because there was no, even if I clicked on tapped on the calendar, nothing. And then I thought, okay, let me just get out of it completely. And when I got out of it completely, I made the mistake of not copying the link to the Saturday. I copied the link when I did the Thursday room, but when I did the Saturday to see if it would take, I didn't even, I closed it so fast because I couldn't find a way to see if it took multiple rooms. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I've really messed this up. And at first, when I went back in and tapped on calendar, nothing was there. So I was like, whoa, did I just break this? Like, what happened? And then I left and came back. Maybe I waited like a couple of minutes, came back in. All of a sudden at the top right, I saw upcoming spaces. And when I tap on it, it shows both of them. And like what you see in the screenshot that host Celine has here, that's what the screen will look like. You tap on upcoming spaces and it shows you the schedule. And if you've got them coming up in the week, it'll say this week. And if they're further out, it'll say this month or near future. And we also have found out through host Celine and through Rachel Thompson, I guess, had done a test, and he did the hat tip to her in the tweet, that the current max of scheduled spaces allowed is 10. So you could schedule up to 10 of them in advance.
Yeah, that's right. I see that it kind of comes up with that, doesn't it, in the instructions. Here are all the spaces you've scheduled. You can edit, share them, or cancel. You can schedule up to 10 spaces at a time. I mean, it's one of those features that seemed like a no-brainer. Like when we first started with spaces, we were all a bit like, well, surely we should be able to schedule these so that we can promote them. As you said at the top of the show, kind of our links and that self-promotion of our spaces is really key to letting people know that we're doing this and getting people in and listening live. And certainly with what we're going to talk about next, it's becoming even more important that we can promote these spaces further ahead and get people to set their reminders. It's interesting that you can schedule so many at a time. But yeah, just so useful. And it just seems like they should have, we felt like this should have been something that had been done months ago.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe they weren't anticipating people hosting multiple rooms or wanting to schedule their weekly room further out. I don't know. I was surprised that it took this long, that's for sure. But look, I'm happy they're doing it. I hope they roll it out to everyone soon that's hosting rooms, because I think this is plus, even if you're just doing them from time to time, how nice is it to just sit down and schedule multiple, and then you don't have to worry about it. You can go schedule your month's worth, copy the links, and then, don't worry about it anymore. And then you can promote them anytime.
Yeah, and I've just thought of something else that I would really like them to allow us to do with it as well, is to transfer the host. So actually, if I've scheduled the rooms coming up, but at the last minute, I can't host it, I want to be able to
pass it to me.
Yeah, so you can take it on. And, again, that's another thing that we've spoken about, isn't it? Kind of the responsibility and the ownership over something. When you're trying to do something consistently, you don't want to be the weak spot. You don't want to be the weak link in the chain. There's got to be a way for that to continue, even if you're not there. And actually, one of the things with me not being here in recent weeks has been that obviously your profile, you've tweeted out the link and your followers have seen it all, but not necessarily my followers. There's kind of that kind of difference, isn't there, between who schedules it and what other people see in terms of consistency. And also, you've got an amazing, wicked number of followers. So obviously more people see it when you schedule it. So it's all really interesting in terms of like, if we could have equal responsibility over the link would be amazing. But to be able to transfer it from this like forward scheduled thing would be fantastic. I don't even know if that's technically possible, but I like to dream.
It would be awesome. The other thing I do want to say, and hopefully Hostling can come up here later when we open up for mic requests, is I was listening to one of his spaces from earlier this week, and he was talking about this new scheduling feature, and there are some parameters with it, like when your room is coming up, like when you can be promoting it, when it's about, I don't know. I was a little confused, but there were some limitations. So hopefully Hosteline can explain that in a little bit, because it's great that we have this feature. I hope people will start using it, but do know there are a few restrictions with it, and hopefully he can come on and clarify. Also, while you were gone, look what's happened, this audio tab. I know you've gotten it. You've had a chance to play with it. I was jealous because you and others had it before I got it. And I just kept closing my app and bringing it back on, checking the app store. Has there been an update? Like, I was like, please let it work. And then crazy out of the blue, I think it was yesterday, all of a sudden I got it. And so, but it's interesting because, my navigation's a little different than yours with what I can see and access. We'll talk about that in a bit, because I do have a tweet where I asked Twitter about this and I haven't heard back from them yet. But yeah, you were away. You did a tweet saying you were away. You're camping for your trip, and then you know all of a sudden you've got the Twitter audio tab.
Yeah, I mean, and it's unusual for me to get a feature before you, to be honest. So I was like, yes, I've got the audio tab. This is amazing. I bet I get back and everyone's got it. But actually, no, it seems that's not the case. And it is still a kind of limited user group. As ever, you know, it's worth us remembering Twitter has done this kind of iterative rollout with lots of different features, with lots of different things over the last year, 18 months or so. And this audio tab is certainly no different. It is most certainly not a fully fledged product. And I don't think they're trying to say that it is. Once again, they're trying to get some feedback. They're trying to build on it and work out what people want from it, work out what's really annoying people with it, what people really like about it, so that they can build it in this kind of agile way, which, you know, I'm getting the impression that's just how Twitter product works, which is fair enough. So to jump on it immediately, this is not perfect. It most certainly has a very glaring issue in terms of searchability and discoverability as far as I can understand it. But I don't think we should be too desperately kind of heavy on them at the moment, because I really feel like surely this just is a first step just to see what we all think, what we're all going to scream about, discoverability. And then I'm hoping it will improve, and probably quite rapidly, considering how fast they've changed other stuff. Or, knowing Twitter, it may well just disappear at the weekend and we'll never see it again. Who knows? I mean, that's the other thing they tend to do. So, but yeah, the audio tab was not something I was kind of expecting very soon. We've certainly spoken about it. We've seen the reverse engineering screenshots of it, but I guess I just kind of thought it was way, way down the line. But there it was, looking exactly the same as Alessandro Paluzzi's screen grabs that he'd managed to tweet out at various times over the last few months. I clicked on it. It has these stations that we've spoken about before, showing some very obvious kind of artwork from podcasts that I most definitely listen to and recognise, in stations which are basically the categories and the genres. So I had, I had daily news, I had marketing, I had travel, you know, nothing that was kind of too surprising to me, technology, all of those kinds of things. And then one that was called Daily Digest, where I could see some lovely faces that I recognised from Spaces. I could see Hosteline, I could see Tanya Schultz, I could see Eileen. And yeah, so I recognised the people that were on those. Now, my immediate reaction was that they had given a very limited playlist basically for each of those stations of podcasts that I might be interested in, and that Daily Digest was where they were putting the Spaces.
Not quite. You know what? I've been playing with it like crazy, Suze, and it must be some kind of algorithm driving it, because it keeps changing. And what I've noticed is that if I completely close the Twitter mobile app and bring it back on, I'll see things different pretty much every time. Yeah.
I had a great conversation with Evan over on his thread. So Evan is part of the Twitter product, and he had tweeted out excitedly about the audio tab being rolled out in beta. And so I put a few questions to him. It appears basically stations are based on our topics. So we've spoken about topics a lot. And topics, you can choose to see tweets that are kind of banded into these different topics. So I've got podcast and broadcasting, I've got radio. I know, Madeline, you've got dogs and pets and things like that you're interested in to see tweets about. These stations basically pull from those different topics, including the topics that we tag our spaces as. So once again, these topics that are available to us when we set up spaces, those of you who are hosts, are becoming even more important because that is where we're going to be categorised. And contrary to how I thought it was working, our spaces should appear within any one of those stations alongside podcasts. So our spaces should be appearing within these playlists that they're pre-selecting, creating algorithmically. So, you know, if we were tagging ourselves as news, potentially we could appear alongside the Daily, for example. And someone would listen through. Now, at the moment, it is that algorithmically driven, selected playlist of about, I don't know, between 6 and 10 podcast episodes. You can't search and you can't kind of change it up. So at the moment, it's very static in terms of what you see. But as Madeline says, it's also very dynamic in that each time you go into it, it is updating and changing. And that was one of the things that Evan was talking about. He was like, but it changes all the time and you'll see new things depending what time of day you go in there. So they've thought about different ways of presenting this content to you, this audio content. They've thought about pulling it from different sources, whether it's RSS feeds, whether it's, you know, traditional podcasters, whether it's Spaces hosts, and they're trying to combine it all in one. But my big gripe has to be that we can't search. We can't search for a podcast.
Right.
And we can't search for a space. And I'm afraid that needs jumping on quick.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, well, let me explain what I noticed yesterday, which was, and actually I need to put this tweet in the nest. I put in a bunch of tweets in the nest for this part of our discussion today. I'm going to add one more real quick because I have a screenshot so you can see what I'm seeing, but is because of a very specific way I'm using my Twitter account. And so I don't think most people are going to see it like this. But what's interesting that I noticed yesterday, like everybody's been talking about how that Do Have It is the Spaces tab changed and now is the same microphone icon, but it says audio instead of Spaces. And when I got this new audio, what I noticed is that I still have a separate link for Spaces. So I did just a bunch of just digging around yesterday, trying to figure out why do I still have my Spaces tab and I have this new audio tab. They're both separate. They're on my left side navigation on the mobile app, and they both have the microphone icon. And through a little bit of trial and error, figuring out is because I have Twitter Blue, which is the subscription service available in the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. So for the $3 a month that I pay, it's actually going up to $5 a month soon. If you have not signed up for Twitter Blue, FYI, they've already raised the price. But for those of us that have been using it, they're going to raise our price in October. But one of the features in Twitter Blue that I absolutely love is your ability to customize your navigation. So when you're using the Twitter mobile app, the bottom icons, you can completely customize it. And what I did about a month ago is I removed the Twitter Spaces tab at the bottom because I realized I wasn't really tapping on it all that much. I can get to it from the left side navigation instead, extra tap or two, but no big deal to me. There was something else that was more important that I wanted at the bottom, and we're limited with how many icons we can have down there. So by doing that, so if you have Twitter Blue, I'm curious if anybody else has Twitter Blue, if they try this, by removing the Spaces tab in your custom navigation, it moves it to your left side navigation. And so that's why I see audio and Spaces as separate links in my navigation. So I can still get to the Spaces tab and go have that discoverability that you're now missing, Suze. Because what I did is when I figured this out, I had gone back in my Twitter Blue, adjusted the custom navigation, put the Spaces tab that, well, now it's audio, put it back in as part of my navigation, and then went back to the left side navigation. Spaces tab was gone. So I don't know if Twitter realized what they had done with that, like that.
Oh, I think they do. I think they do, because Evan...
You think?
Yeah, I mean, part of my tweet to Evan was, look, there's no discoverability here. And he kind of came back with, yeah, well, hosts have got to be sharing out the link. They've got to be, promoting their space. And I'll try and find the tweet while we're chatting. Yeah, and he was kind of insinuating that, yeah, that was just the way it was going to sort of be. And I was like, no, it can't be, though, because there are so many. We know how many, like, thousands of spaces there are that even we, we're kind of all in our own little bubble here. Like, when you look at Spaces dashboard, you can see how many spaces there are going on around the world at any one time. There are thousands and thousands. And, to only get, like, a real small sprinkle of a few of them in this audio tab just isn't on. And to be honest, hosts won't continue if people aren't going to find them and join their spaces. What's the point, really, in the end, of preparing stuff, or of even, all of this costs something. It costs us all our time, if nothing else. And that is really valuable. And if we're not getting the engagement, the traction, building the relationships that Twitter Spaces was put here to offer us, then people just won't do it anymore. So I really feel like they've got to make sure that people can discover spaces. And I don't know why we're going back to this conversation with them. Like, we started out saying, okay, where's our spaces tab and where's our searchability? And then we got the space bar, and it was like, well, yeah, that's great, but we want to see how many spaces there are. What are we missing from the other side of the world? All that kind of thing. And they've still never really nailed that. And now they've just pulled the rug. They've just literally gone, oh, do you know what? It will all happen algorithmically and magically, depending on what you're already listening to. Do you know what? I don't want to listen to more of what I'm listening to. I want to find out what I'm not listening to. I want to find out what else is going on and hear new stuff. And that's not going to happen if I'm not able to scroll that Spaces tab anymore. So yeah, it's a very interesting approach. As I say, at the top of this, I did try and moderate myself and say I'm not going to be too heavy on them, because I'm sure this is iterative. This is why. Because actually, I'm really quite cross about it.
Well, no, I mean, everything you're saying is so valid. I mean, discoverability is incredibly important. How are we supposed to find, just like with podcasts as well? And so when I go into this audio tab, it is very frustrating how limited it is. There's no way to search. The algorithm is choosing for me what they think I want. Now, this is the time for everybody. Do this today. Go into your topics in Twitter. You can get to it on desktop or mobile. If you're on mobile, it's on that left sidebar menu. If you're on desktop, click on More at the bottom, and you'll see topics. Go in your topics. If you're not using this, go pick things that are important to you, because that's how things will be discoverable in this new audio tab. I was getting stuff in this audio tab that I don't care about anymore, Sue, so I realized today, like, oh, let me go back into my topics and adjust it, because I'm not really just as into the whole NFT and Web3 like I was at the beginning of the year. And it was pulling up all these podcasts and spaces for that in this new audio tab. So I removed it, and very quickly the whole thing changed for me. So I'm impressed at how quickly it will adjust based on the topics you select. But what you'll notice when you're swiping across to the different items, like one of them says marketing. It says, because you follow marketing. That is the marketing topic. That's one of the topics I chose for my Twitter topic. And that is showing me some spaces and some podcasts. And what I find interesting is, again, when I close the app and come back in, it'll completely change. There are times where it's all marketing podcasts, and podcasts I'm familiar with, Gary Vee, Amy Porterfield, things like that. And then I'll come back and half of them will be spaces. And so there's a little bit of discoverability there, because I'm finding spaces I did not know about and people I didn't know about, but it falls under marketing. So I like that. But here's another drawback that I don't know if people like this. I do not. Like, I see under marketing right now, is somebody's profile picture is so dark, I can't even make it out. Can't even tell. It looks like a person from far away. I'm not going to tap on it right now. If I do, it's going to start playing, and it'll mess up me being in this room. But it will automatically play. You should be able to tap and have it show you what the room is before you decide you want to listen to the replay. So I was quite surprised that I have to tap and I'm already in. And so I did not really like that. But then the next one says, because you follow women in tech. And women in tech is a topic. It's all podcasts, probably because there are not any spaces that they have for me under that topic. So it's interesting, and it makes me realize I've got to pay attention to what my topics are and make sure I really hone in on things that interest me, because that will help over here. And I've been saying for a very long time to everyone to utilize the topics feature, because Twitter said a long time ago that was going to help with discoverability. So now we can see that it does. Before, I think it was just part of the algorithm working for us through our topics, but you couldn't really tell for sure. Whereas now it just glares at you because you follow marketing, because you follow women in tech. So I like that it's let me know that because of the topics I have chosen, the algorithm is trying to find spaces and podcasts for me. So I think that's a plus, but I don't like that I can't go search, because what if I want to listen to what we understand right now is only popular podcasts. So our podcast is probably not on there. They're saying for now is the big podcast. So I like that I can listen to one of my, like I see Tim Ferriss. I like Tim Ferriss's podcast. So I can listen while I'm surfing Twitter or doing something else. But what if I wanted to do a search and see, and what if in the algorithm he doesn't pop up right now, but he did yesterday, and I want to listen to his podcast in Twitter? I can't go do a search.
Yeah, I think it's asking a lot of people to double check their topics and all of that as well. I mean, we're going to do it because we're really interested in it and we're trying to figure out how it all works. But in terms of someone who just ends up with the audio tab, I'm not entirely sure they're going to take the time to make sure they're seeing the right stuff. And so then they're going to miss out. And also, like, I've found this, one of the tweets from Evan on the thread, someone said, you've taken away the ability to search spaces that are happening now or in the future, bring that back. And Evans replied, search filter : spaces in Twitter's regular search. Now, this was a hack that Hosalim found like a year ago, before we had any discoverability at all. And quite rightly, someone's come back and replied to Evan, that's terrible and you know it, stop playing. I mean, that is actually his response, is to use the old style of trying to filter out spaces from the feed. I don't know. Surely they can't be thinking that they're going to keep it this way. Surely not.
I know. I mean, maybe they're still figuring it out and they're just letting some of us have this. They want the feedback, and boy, are we giving them feedback. We are giving it to them, for sure.
He said, like, in the same way we don't show every user every tweet, this is totally read from Evan's response to me, we aren't showing every space all at once. The new tab helps personalise audio for people so they can find stuff without having to comb through everything, while customers can still find specific content through regular search. And, we had a bit of a back and forth, and he said, I hear your feedback. We'll make sure we think about these things as we learn from this experiment, which again is why I said perhaps this will all disappear in a few days anyway, because, I don't know, his chosen word of experiment there made me think, oh, okay. So, we're still very much testing and trying, but I just think it doesn't really work without a search. And, as we've always said, anything that Twitter brings on board is there to keep us on Twitter for longer. And I get that, we might listen to a podcast that we might not have listened to and spin that up within Twitter if we've seen it. But most certainly, I listen to podcasts all the time on Apple Podcasts while I'm scrolling Twitter. I don't even think about it. I wouldn't necessarily think to start a podcast in Twitter because I'm on Twitter, if you see what I mean. I might be scrolling and see one and therefore start it within the app, but I don't think I would use it as my main podcast app. So it's a big behaviour change that you're asking people to make if we're talking about Twitter becoming a podcast host, as it were. But yeah, super exciting to see it all happen, and I'm desperate to hear what everybody in here thinks.
Before we move on, I just put in the nest, Andrew Lyons is here. Hello, Andrew. And he did a tweet reply in the chat, and he made such a great point. His Spaces dashboard, which is awesome, spacesdashboard.com. He says Spaces topics, currently 2,036 of them, are not to be ignored. So what a great reminder, Andrew, to throw that out there to our community that, yes, you want discoverability? go to spacesdashboard.com/topic, and there's all the topics. And right now it says live now for NFTs. There's 55 live spaces right now, 41 entertainment. This is in top to bottom with the number of business and finance, just 36 right now. So, don't forget this great free tool, spacesdashboard.com. I mean, if Twitter is going to make discoverability a little bit harder for us, at least we know we've got Andrew's website to make things way easier on us.
Yeah, we're very lucky.
We are. Thank you, Andrew. We love you. The other thing I wanted to mention next up is that somebody was asking recently, like, hey, if you're listening to a podcast in this new Twitter audio hub, can you be, number one, while you're listening, could you be scrolling and surfing around Twitter? And could you just be surfing around on your phone doing something else? Actually, this was brought up last week, I believe here or one of my other rooms. I know I heard somebody ask about this last week as well. And it was a good question. I didn't have this audio tab yet. So before I now know you can because I've tried it. But Eileen had done a tweet, Eileen Smith, and she said, and it's in the nest, she said, wondering if you can listen to Twitter's new audio hub in the background while using other apps on your phone. Yes, you can. You can definitely be multitasking and listening. And it'll be interesting to see with the ability to listen to podcasts in Twitter, will this replace your current way of listening to it? Like I will tell you, I am not using the Apple podcast player. I got really fed up with it about a year ago because it got so bad for me personally. So I use Overcast, which I love. Overcast just gives me other features. I like the way everything's categorized. And that is my way of listening to podcasts. That's not going to change. But if I come over to this audio hub and I see a podcast, even if it's one I normally listen to, I might be, I can just tap on this and listen here. I don't have to leave and go back to my podcast app. So I feel like it's a complementary thing. Is that how you feel, Suze? Like, do you feel like this will complement?
Yeah, well, kind of as I just said, like if I'm scrolling the audio tab on Twitter and I see something that I want to listen to, then I may well click on it. But I think, I'm not going to be looking for an episode within Twitter. I don't know. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Until it's all there and up and running and showing different things. At the moment, none of the episodes really that it was showing me were particularly ones I wanted to listen to. But then I'm a bit of I don't know. I listen to podcasts in an odd way. I kind of go back to episodes from ages ago that I want to listen to and I bookmark them and all sorts of things. And as I say, I'm also someone who'll just dip into something that I've never listened to before rather than listening to the same thing consistently. So what it's showing me is what it's expecting that I might listen to, but I'm probably left field of that. So I don't know. I'm not your typical listener, probably.
Well, it'll definitely be interesting to see how our listeners hear. I would love to hear their thoughts on this. And this is a perfect time to mention a tweet that you discovered from Simon Hodgkins, where he says, are podcasts on Twitter Spaces going to be a success or failure? And there's so many different ways of looking at that, right? I mean, that's just not a cut and dry statement because, I think a lot of people, when we kept hearing about this new audio thing with podcasts coming, a lot of people made the assumption, because I kept seeing people tweet about this, I think people made the assumption that, this means my podcast can be on Twitter or my Spaces is going to turn into a podcast automatically in Twitter. And so that's not the case here.
Yeah, I read the question and I was like, is that the right question? Or am I just reading this slightly wrongly? Because podcasts and Spaces are still two very separate things. And that's why the tab is called audio, in order to combine them both. And I still see that Spaces, they can be turned into a podcast. Obviously they can. That's what we do every single week. Equally, I think they're a great sidecar to a podcast where you have the actual live conversation about the topic that you've done the podcast on. You can use them in lots of different ways. But I think, as you say, there's this kind of, did this new audio tab mean that our Spaces are going to instantly be a podcast? Is a replay of a space actually a podcast? I mean, I'm probably being really pedantic and semantics and all the rest of it. And it's blown my brain a little bit trying to explain it. But yeah, it was just an interesting thought, because there was also a question that was asked that I actually answered somewhere on Twitter during the week, where someone had said, oh, but the audio quality on Spaces is terrible. So why would you want to listen to a podcast on Twitter? And I was like, oh, you're crossing audio paths there, because actually the audio quality of a podcast is what it is within that audio file. Listening to it on Twitter is not going to change the quality of that podcast. You're listening to it from its feed. We're not being given direct access to that feed, but we're still just listening to the audio file that we would listen to, the same as if we were in Overcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. It's still the same podcast file. So whether or not the Spaces audio is of the quality that you want it to be is kind of irrelevant in terms of podcasting. So I think there's a bit of like crossing wires and audio ideas, but I get why they've called the tab audio. But I wonder if everyone's kind of aware of Spaces as podcasts as Spaces, and how it all ends up. What a mix. I mean, what a mixture to be in the middle of.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just 100% with everything you said. So very quickly, we've been hearing this for a while now, that Twitter is working on the ability to have Twitter Spaces in communities, something that I've been advocating for some time, because I think what a great way to host spaces for your own private communities or public, however you have your community set up, if you're utilizing that. And so Alessandro Paluzzi had a new tweet screenshot showing like how it's coming together. It's looking really good. And there was also a tweet from one of the engineers at Twitter where she did a little 1-minute video just showing like the early concept of how they're trying to use this as a way for you to connect with your community through the power of voice. So really excited to see all this moving forward. Still don't know when that's going to happen, but it should be soon.
Yeah, I think so. I think what this made me think about is we've discussed how this is kind of equal potentially to the new houses that are over on Clubhouse. What I was thinking earlier today, I've got access to the Twitter circle, and I was actually thinking I'm more likely to want to spin up a space with my circle maybe. Like, how does that change the dynamic of spaces? Like, if you could just have that that space that's just available for the people that you've added to your Twitter circle, then you could just have your space for your community. And what does that do? And then the public space as well. Like, there's so many different ways of, using spaces. And I felt like actually, if there were to be like a Twitter circle version, that is definitely just like the houses that are happening over on Clubhouse. And yeah, I mean, as soon as I feel like they've thought of everything, they think of something else. It's fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would love to hear from our listeners. So feel free to request the mic, because that's the news for this week. And we are so curious to hear your thoughts on all of this. If you have this new audio tab, what are your thoughts? So come request the mic and let's chat it out for sure. Hosteline is first up. Hey, Hosteline. Glad you're here with us.
I just wanted to do a quick update on the ability to schedule more than one space at a time for a total of 10 spaces. So there's two things to be aware of. One is you could promote your next space in your current space only if you've tweeted the space out beforehand. Because while you're in a space, you cannot go ahead and tweet those spaces that are in the queue. So that's something to know. So what you might get accustomed to doing is as you're adding new spaces to the queue, just tweet them out and say, oh, I just added this space to my queue. That way it's out there. So that way you don't forget. Then you could create a bookmark list of all your spaces, call it like My Spaces, and then just go into those bookmarks and just use them until you don't need them. Well, you could always reuse them, right? Because it's they're recorded forever. So that's number one. Number two is you have to also tweet out the space half an hour, longer than half an hour before your next space is scheduled. Because when you're in the 30-minute window of your scheduled space, it automatically just prompts you to start that next space.
Gotcha. That makes perfect sense. So basically what you're saying is, if I understand right, when you schedule a room, copy the link, put it somewhere.
Tweet it out. Well, both. I just say tweet it out because then you don't have one less thing to do while you're in the space. So I'm like, oh, let me just tweet it out. It's already there. And you start collecting people to RSVP. So that's the way I do it. But yes, you could copy the link.
When I set up a room, even though it's been one at a time until now, first thing I do before I even close the screen is I copy the link and I use the notes feature on my iPhone and on my iMac, especially since they can both, see each other. And I always put the link in there. So I have it to use in my promotions. So then I don't ever have to go digging through to go find it again on my phone. And it makes sense that, when you're saying you're 30 minutes from a scheduled room, it's just going to show you because, you're getting ready to start your room. So that makes sense to me. Okay. Thanks for clarifying all that.
Yeah. I mean, if the room doesn't necessarily need to be a half an hour beforehand, you could obviously change the time and tweet it out, blah, 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 at dire situations. But then again, your people that RSVP don't know. They don't get that notification. They just get the notification that it starts, not that you change the time. So that's just something to be aware of. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing all that. And we do have a lot of speakers here. So Eileen's next up. Hey, Eileen.
Hello. Hey, Suze. Hey, Madeline. Hello, all audio enthusiasts. I just really quickly wanted to give my little thoughts about the audio tab. And first, Madeline, you are definitely right. If you've got Twitter Blue and you've changed that navigation, you end up with two links if you put the Spaces tab on the left. And so you have an audio tab and a Spaces tab, which is probably confusing to some people.
Do you think they did that on purpose so that because we're in Twitter Blue that we're not losing that? Because I feel bad for everybody else that can't do it because they've lost that discoverability aspect.
Well, the thing is, if you have not changed your navigation, because I have two phones and I went to my other phone, which I did not change that navigation. And I thought I didn't have the audio tab because I just saw the spaces at the bottom. And in fact, I think I was on a space talking about it saying, it was the video I did. And I was like, oh, I don't have it on this phone. That's really weird. I never tapped on it during the video. It wasn't until later on I went back and tapped on it, and it gave me the audio tab. It gave me the audio tab. It did not give me the Spaces tab that everybody, people who aren't in the test have. So it does add to confusion, and I will agree with Suze that it is confusing for a lot of people who think that their space has now become a podcast because it's in that tab, or and I think that hopefully this is going to just become clearer over time as people are using it, and more folks like myself are putting out tutorials and doing screenshots and so forth. But I don't think that this audio tab was really meant for folks like everyone in this space today. This is, in my opinion, a discovery tool for people who really don't listen to podcasts. They might have been curious about a podcast, but let me just go over to this. And okay, if I can listen to them on Twitter, I'm already here. I'm going to now spend more time on Twitter. And there's a Twitter space. That's interesting. I heard about those things. There is one right there. And it's going to be discovery of our spaces. It's not discovery of your podcast. Yeah, I'm still hopeful for it, for, us, spaces, listeners, social enthusiasts like us, social audio enthusiasts, that we'll be able to get back to a place where we can discover. Of course, there's still the little spaces at the top. None of us use that because it doesn't look the way we want it to look, but it's still there. But it's something that they've got to iterate on. Oh, and also, if you scroll past, if you swipe up instead of like swiping to the left or right, if you swipe up, you will see other recommended.
Right. Algorithm is pulling that in, and every time you close the app and go back in, the bottom part changes. The first few don't, but then further down it does. Yeah, it's just the algorithm at work. I'm not really caring for it. It's not really helping me much. That's why I'm glad I still have the Spaces tab, honestly. And some people might go, maybe I should sign up for Twitter Blue if it's available in your country, because you do get some cool features, and I do like that I can still get to the Spaces tab. But then again, there's Andrew's cool site. You could always go to spacesdashboard.com. Andrew's next up. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, welcome back, Suze.
Thanks, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good. And I'm probably the only one who was delighted with this new rollout of this.
I bet you are.
Yeah, I bet you were.
And I have to pick up on something last week, actually, Madeline. I was listening back to it. And this was a really interesting thing. I was listening back to your podcast last week on the Amazon Echo. My kids were in the kitchen going, Dad, why is somebody talking about the Spaces dashboard? Because they didn't realize that Twitter Spaces can also be pushed out to all of these amazing places. And you mentioned last week that we did an update where you could now search for live, upcoming, and for the first time ever, past Twitter Spaces. And the thing I want to make clear, because I had a couple of developers contact me saying, I hear they've put past Spaces into the API. That's not actually the case. We are the only ones who have past Spaces because we've been saving and collecting them.
Oh, interesting.
You cannot. Anybody else who's using the Twitter API only gets upcoming and live. When we started this, we foresaw what was going to happen. Eventually, they would be recorded, they would become more and more valuable, and you'd want to be able to search and discover past Twitter Spaces. So there is only one place in the world on Twitter where you can find live, upcoming, and recorded spaces in the search. And that's on the Spaces dashboard.
Oh, that is a scoop. Thank you for sharing that.
And the other thing, I don't know if you've noticed that we also have tried to make it easier for people to search, because I find it absolutely amazing that you had conversation with somebody and they said, well, it's not our issue. You've got to try and make it easier to be able to make your spaces more discoverable.
I was surprised by that too. That was a weird remark.
I'm kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt that, I kind of feel like perhaps he might regret that in future. Like, it doesn't seem like a very Twitter stance to have given that reply. And as I said at the top, like, let's not be too harsh on them. I'm sure it's all being iterative and I'm sure it's coming and all the rest of it. But yeah, I feel like that was a bit of a daft response to someone, really, because that's literally just taken us back 18 months in terms of the native capability of the app.
Yeah. And just to point out, the key thing we've done on the dashboard is we've tried to implement what we call assisted search. So as you type 2 letters, we then look through the whole database and try and pinpoint, are you looking for a live, an upcoming, or a past Twitter space? And the more you type, the more it adapts and changes. So, for example, when I type SUZ, you're the first person that comes up now because you're live. Social audio. And it's about that discovery port. But we also bring you upcoming and ended spaces. And if you want to then click on that particular user, you can click on them and find all of the content that they've ever done and go back and listen to it. It's the way this moves forward is the fact that we highlight all of the amazing hosts that are on Twitter Spaces. And I 100% can guarantee if anybody says, I can't find anything good to find on Twitter Spaces, it's because they're looking in the wrong place. They're not using the search. There are so many amazing hosts and conversations out there that are happening all the time, 24/7. And as you rightly pointed out, globally, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I just want to stress for all of you listening, all of you hosts are in the right place. This is only going to get bigger. You are all going to be stars. You are all going to be picked up. The more you do, the more you nurture your craft and you become the experts that you are, I 100% guarantee that the opportunities that will come to you, none of us could predict.
No, it's amazing. I mean, audio is just most definitely blowing up absolutely everywhere. If we thought it was already on the rise, all it's doing is just going further and further. So I think you're absolutely right, Andrew. And, you know, I'm grateful for all the hard work that you've put into the Spaces dashboard up until now. And certainly when Twitter does something like this, it becomes totally invaluable. So thank you. And I hope that those of you that are in the space and listening to the podcast that haven't checked out the Spaces dashboard yet will go along and do that. Please do check it out.
George is next, and then we'll close it out with Michael. Hey, George.
Hey, how you doing? Welcome back, Suze. I basically pushed the button to request it to come up and say basically what Andrew said, which is use Spaces dashboard. But I wanted clarification. I haven't gotten it yet. So when I do get it, does that mean that search is going to disappear from my searches tab? I got that. I'll keep the searches tab because I've got it also like Madeline over on the left. So I'll have Spaces and audio. But if I click on the Spaces tab, I'm not going to be able to get search.
So you're saying you have Twitter Blue and you're keeping the audio in Spaces. Okay. Yeah. Spaces is still the same. The Spaces tab, if you have Twitter Blue and you can still get to Spaces away on the left sidebar, it's nice to know that other Twitter Blue subscribers see what I'm seeing. Okay. Yes, that search for a space is still at the top. So you don't lose. I don't see anything different with Spaces, but this new audio tab just feels so limited. There's no search in there. And it's just purely algorithm.
Can you just, for listeners who aren't so sophisticated, can you just mention how do you do a global search for space? Jocelyn's trick. Just repeat that for all of us.
Yeah, I haven't got the tweet back up in front of me. I think it's filter::spaces into the search bar there, and that should bring up the different spaces, which is kind of the old school way of searching. I've actually found the tweet where someone from Twitter had been asked about live spaces discovery following the introduction of the new audio tab. And they gave 4 top tips for finding spaces. 1, look at the space bar. 2, schedule and reminders. So that's for hosts, making sure that you're scheduling your space early enough to tweet out reminders. 3, get other people to tweet it out and share it. 4, ask people to set always notify when you go live. So this is the bell symbol that's on each person's profile. What wasn't mentioned in that conversation was a way to actually browse live spaces. So
pretty lame.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
and Suze and George, sorry. The reason why I started Spaces dashboard was because filter::spaces wasn't good enough.
That's so interesting to know, Andrew, because most people don't even understand how to do that or where to go. All right, last up, we've got Michael Sterling to close out. We've already gone over our hour, so let's go ahead and wrap it up with him. Hey, Michael, thank you for joining us.
Hi, all. Friendly
Hi.
faces all around. Yeah, I just came real fast to sort of share some breaking news in the last couple of hours. So Clubhouse, as you may have heard, has this houses beta going on. Up until today, you could only get into a house if someone invited you, but now they have activated the wait list. So now any members can tap on a house on someone's profile. Any Clubhouse users can tap on a house on someone's profile and you can see the house. And if the wait list is enabled by the founder, you can tap the blue button and get on the wait list. So it's just another way to get more people into houses and get more engagement. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks a lot. Oh, and by the way, Madeline, thank you so much for the information about topics. Like I went through as you were talking about them all, and I made sure to select all the topics and deselect certain things. And so hopefully that's going to help the algorithms with that audio tab.
It will, because as soon as I reworked mine earlier today, I saw an immediate difference when I went back into the audio tab. So it does work and is very quick. So I definitely recommend for everybody to go spend a little bit of time in your topics. It doesn't matter if you do it on mobile or desktop, either or, it's all tied together. But definitely go through, because if you don't have any set up, by adding some, it will really help when you're starting to go through the audio tab. And then if you're like me, maybe you have too many. So by having too many and you're using this audio tab, you're like, wait a minute, some of these are okay, some of these are not. Let me fine tune my topic. So yeah, that can make a big difference. So thank you for bringing that up, Michael.
Most of my topics are missing. They're not there as topics.
Well, Twitter has developed lots of topics. You can't choose your own. But when they first came out with this feature a while back, it only started with like 100 and it was terrible. Like it was awful. So they've been adding more and more over time. So go through it and you might see that it's improved. Like now they even have Twitter, they have Clubhouse. Like I want to stay more on top of things going on with Twitter. So that wasn't even let me tell you what Twitter did. They had Clubhouse as a topic before they had Twitter Spaces as a topic. What was that about? So there is a Twitter Spaces topic. There's so many now. And I definitely recommend everybody go through that and either select some if you haven't or fine tune what you already have and maybe scale back a little bit and just kind of A/B test it, play around with it, and then go look at if you have the audio tab, go, play around with it. But even if you don't have the audio tab yet and you still have the Spaces tab, I am almost certain it is playing a role in the Spaces tab. It's just not as obvious as it is with the audio tab. Super obvious because it shows you the different topics as you swipe across.
Yeah, I think upcoming Spaces in the Spaces tab probably still ran on those topics. But what we even found this week, Madeline, is that you and I don't have the same list of topics. Like you can tag this space as podcasting and I don't have podcasting. I have looked through every single tag I could possibly do. It's not under entertainment, it's not under business and entrepreneurs and careers, it's certainly not any of the universities it gives me or colleges from the US or any of the cryptocurrencies. But, podcasting would be a really useful tag for this.
But if you're into knitting, there is a topic for knitting. So, yeah.
Totally. Exactly. But of course, if Madeline sets up all things audio next week, she'll tag it as podcasting and different tags to me because all I can do is digital marketing, Twitter and small business, I think, are the three that I've got. They're the only three that seem relevant. It's very strange. We've got different lists.
And just FYI for everyone, this is topics when you're scheduling or going live with a room in Spaces, which is not the same as the topics in your navigation to go select on Twitter. So yeah, it is odd that when I go and schedule the rooms that I have, that if we're going to be talking about Twitter, I have that as a topic I can select, but you don't in the podcast. Or do you have the Twitter one? I know it's the podcast one you don't have, right?
Yeah, I don't have the podcast one. I'm not sure if I've got Twitter.
Odd.
I'll have to have a look.
So here's what we do. Like you were out last week, so I'm the one that scheduled this room last Wednesday. So the three that I always put in is Twitter, because we talk about so much with Twitter. There's not a Twitter Spaces, even though in the topics, which is separate, there is Twitter and there's a Twitter Spaces topic. But when we're setting up our rooms, there is very limited with the topics. But I'd put Twitter, digital creators, and there's one called podcasts and radio. And I don't know why you can't get that one. But here's what's interesting. I do want to point out to everyone. So Suze, when you and I were chatting about this in the DMs before, and you were asking me which category is that under, and I went to go look, and I literally could not find it. I could not find, because there's different categories: entertainment, business, finance. I went through every category. It's already saved. Like if you're a Spaces host and you're utilizing, you can put up to 3 topics to help with discoverability. They seem to be saved in there, I guess, but there's no way to delete them. They're like, every time I go to schedule, it pulls up every topic I've used in past rooms. It's a bunch of them. I have to swipe across. But if I go back to where they all originate at, it doesn't show me where I got that podcast and radio.
Whatever you do, Madeline, don't delete it if you're not going to be able to get it back, because podcasting, the thing is, it's one of the stations. So this is what concerns me now, is that if the stations are being named as per the topics that we've got available to us, and we've all got different topics, and how are we ever going to know how to get discovered via a station? Andrew, I see that hand.
Well, I just wanted to highlight something so everybody really, I'm not saying feel sorry for Twitter, but understands what they're going through. Because we've just updated something on the Spaces dashboard stats, which essentially you can find if you go to Spaces dashboard and you log on to My Spaces and you scroll down to the footer, you'll find some very interesting links. And one of them we've just updated purely based on this conversation. And what we now reveal is the number of participants, the people listening in spaces across the globe each month. Now, I'm going to ask you both, how many people do you think listened to Twitter Spaces? This is not the replay. This is just live in July. Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to make this dynamic pause because when people are listening back to the podcast, this is what it's about. Where we are now, social audio on Twitter Spaces, just in July, the amount of people that tuned in to a live Twitter Space was 75,347,524.
Wow. That is insane.
And in August, we are just about to hit a peak where we've now totaled over 1 million total spaces in August.
Now, Andrew, are those different people or are they listens? Are they people or listens?
These are the participants through the API that we get currently now, and you get from all the data. We are currently now in August. I mean, we've still got a couple of hours left, but we've increased. We're on 78 million total participants. Now, remember, people move in and out of space at any particular time. So these could be individuals, totally unique ones. We don't currently know about that. But the numbers are absolutely staggering.
That is just amazing. Andrew, thank you for sharing that with us. That is mind-blowing, and it really shows you the power of audio. I mean, these numbers should be put out more often, so that people see like the enormity.
If you want to get to them, spacesdashboard.com/stats. These are live numbers that we're pushing out now on a regular basis for everybody to see, because we all have to be aware how amazing the Twitter Spaces is. It really is leading the way.
Well, it's interesting because, I'm on it right now. I'm at spacesdashboard.com/stats. And it says right now, live spaces, there's over 1,700 of them, and there's number of speakers, 6,115. Right now, that's how many people are a speaker in a live space right now. I mean, try to wrap your head around that. That is amazing. Like, there's so much going on at any given time.
It's a stunned silence if ever I heard one.
I know. I think all of our minds have just been blown. I think they've all exploded.
Totally.
Well, what a great way to close out this room with all of us just being stunned. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.